Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Roll-Up Productions. Tonight, I'm going to be featuring a beloved series called The Sopranos, which I had recently watched it in its entirety. I had kind of missed the party, but I had finally gotten around to it to see what all the hype was about. I know it was kind of based on a movie that came out before it called Analyze This, or at least the idea was based around it, where a hardened mobster goes to a psychologist and kind of talks about his feelings, which was unheard of when it came to the older generation, who kept things bottled up and not really talk about their emotions and feelings. I guess that's why they dropped dead of a heart attack at the age of 41. Sometimes you gotta admit a cat is cute. Like, let's just stop and appreciate this right quick. Anyway, back to the story. And the movie shows the younger version of a lot of the beloved characters you see in the actual Sopranos series.
I wonder if I can talk to you alone for a moment, Mr. Soprano. On the basis of the standards and eggs, high IQ.
I had saw a 20th anniversary reunion special where they had gathered most of the cast, minus Drea Di Matteo, in which they talk about the beloved series and their experiences. You could tell that they had been making their rounds and had been kind of asked the same package of questions, which sometimes when you make something that is so beloved, it is hard to live it down. Just like perhaps making a mistake. Some people never let you live that down. And they talk about their fondness and memories of James Gandolfini, which admittedly, he is a great actor. He has a very good range of emotions and a lot of complexities and dimensions of a gangster who's at the top of the food chain. But like many others in history, it was kind of passed down to him versus ability, or maybe, let's say, putting his dues in. Now, I have yet to see this prequel, but it looks like it has top-notch actors in it. Vera Farmiga, the dude from the Punisher series is in it. It has Ray Liotta. So they have always used top-notch production and top-notch actors, even in a series that was made for television, which was originally proposed to Fox but was turned down, which turned out to be a blessing for the series due to its graphic nature, language, violence, subject matter. You can do a lot more on, let's say, HBO Showtime, which Fox took this and ran with it and started their own FX series, which has Snowfall, Atlanta, and other series that are kind of like this. Here's Paul Cicero, or Sakai, I'm not quite sure how his name is pronounced, but he is the real thing. And I had found an interview from him in 1987 where he kind of has a confessional. I always thought this was a funny scene of him. This was an old interview from, like I said, 1987, where he's asked about his dirt. And the interviewer even asked him if he killed somebody, and he kind of laughs and says, "No, I haven't." But you can see there's a kind of sadness about him, which translates to his character in the actual series. He has more superstitions than a 100-year-old gypsy, and a lot of that is passed down from the old country. This guy still lives by the mafia code, real standout in the series. Always had funny one-liners or just funny mannerisms, which makes the character interesting. Unlike some of the other characters that, maybe not so much. Here he is, kind of in the winter of his life, and he is much older here. And he talks about his fondness of the show and how he got the part, remembering Tony, and he seems to be entirely grateful for it, which just goes to show you never know where life will lead you. Here is James Gandolfini in a 60-minute interview, which they talk about the series and the actual repercussions and the upsides and the downsides of being Tony Soprano, which people will always associate him with because their fondest memories of him are the actual series, which the artist has to be the one who lives with something. They say don't do anything great if you can't live with the consequences of it. Like another famous series, which is Game of Thrones, the ending of this was kind of questionable. People still debate whether or not he was killed or it was left open for the viewer to continue discussing and making it relevant till this day. Did he die or didn't he die? As a creator myself, I think it was simply left open-ended. So you could have prequels, you could add to the story, you could do this, that, and the third, which oftentimes a lot of people in their books, movies, or whatever kind of art, they leave it open-ended and leave it to the imagination of the viewer or the reader. But sometimes it's this simple. Couldn't come up with a good enough ending to do the series justice, so you leave it open-ended. Because in my experience, tying everything together is one of the hardest things to do of the story. The beginning and the middle, that's the easy part. Anyway, the interesting part to me is, hang on a minute. Wow, she really was a pretty girl. I never thought much of Carmela. I call her catcher's mitt or Leatherface. She never really was that pretty to me. But the Drea Di Matteo, a little bit different opinion on her. I guess you weren't the favorite this time, Evie. But I like the dynamic between Tony and his psychologist because it kind of reveals his psyche. Is he a sociopath, or is he just somebody so hardened that he's buried and compartmentalized all those squishy little feelings that he has inside? You never really know. He's kind of in a marriage that's kind of reached a plateau. They're just together. And, because of their deep Catholic values, they are not going to divorce each other, no matter how much they hate each other. Another interesting character, Silvio, I always found him to be another one of the standouts in there. Being stoic at times, but also having this rage in him, which he is the concierge to Tony, which I found may not be the best bet, but I think he was the lesser of the evils. He had the most control. But, like I said, this series sparked so many other TV series that you see now on streaming services, which indirectly or directly started due to a series like this. This is basically 6 seasons, I think, somewhere 13 episodes per season. So this is like a 60-hour movie when you talk about actors, production value, story, the way it is written. It's very smartly written, very funny. So people took it and ran. And now you see examples would be Ozark, Snowfall, Atlanta, a lot of series that you see now. But it definitely changed the landscape of how we watch and view TV nowadays. I relate to Tony because he kind of falls in that Gen X group, kind of where I'm at. We're called the flyover generation. We're not spoke of as much as the boomers or the millennials, so we're kind of a blend of the two. We have one foot in the old and one foot in the new, and that's where Tony found himself. This was a changing of the guard. Somebody who wasn't quite with the old ways and kind of was looking towards the future, which may be why he was a successful leader. He was ruthless in his own way, not respected by the elderly, looked as kind of like the boy king who was just handed the reins. And he's dealing with a mother who possibly didn't love him, a psychopathic father. And he goes to, like I say, the good doctor, who was played by Lorraine Bracco, which she was from Goodfellas. She plays a kind of a slow to anger, slow to judge approach to psychiatry, where she tries to lead him to his own evaluation of himself, to help him make sense of some of his nightmares, some of his dreams, some of his viewpoints, and a lot of, let's say, the past comes up. And everything seems to tie into his mother, who seemed to be a very manipulative, hateful kind of spirit.
Hey, that one's laughing.
But
Poison ivy?
it shows that he does have depth and feeling. He's not a complete sociopath. He's just good at compartmentalizing, like a lot of criminals.
What the fuck are they saying?
He kind of views himself as the scorpion.
Fuck you with this bullshit.
But like everybody, a scorpion needs a hug and needs love every now and then too, understandably. The series starts towards the end of the 90s, which, in my opinion, the 90s was just one long commercial of excess and get it how you live and get money. That was the 90s. And it's pretty much carried into marriage. Carmela is equally as greedy as Tony, equally as power hungry. She compliments him in some way. So the American dream got a facelift, so to speak. And most of the people from my generation chased it. The flyover generation. The more comfort and options you try to give your family, the more unhappy they seem to become. Like most things, there are a ripple effect and unforeseen events that even the most cunning of mobsters have no answer to. Money is both powerful and feeble when it comes to matters of the heart. A gangster who is trained to eradicate anything that could potentially harm his business seemed to be unable to get his own house in order. He is depressed, cynical, emotionally infantile, and seeks counsel from a professional, which is looked down upon from the older generation. With more hang-ups, mommy issues, and insecurities than any one person should have, he is able to function and thrive as a criminal, which in the end validates his behavior. So he's basically a scorpion trying to be a Labrador. But the age-old proverb comes to mind. It's impossible to serve two masters. There's a fight of good and bad within a person. It can be very exhausting, maddening, and paranoia is always nagging at you. Self-delusion and ego seem to be his biggest enemies, and those he can't kill. His wife also not that much help and seems to have the characteristics that are similar to him. She hides behind religion, money, power, and most of all, the vagina. She finds out about his infidelities and tries to put on a strong face, but is inside the hatred and resentment builds. It's simple. Cheating is a spiritual crime, and there are no penalties or punishments for it. There's no laws, is what I'm trying to say. I commend anyone who tries to work through this, but it is a steep mountain to climb. In any relationship, there has to be some type of boundaries or limit. Otherwise, your life it's fair game. They knew what they were getting into, but like most, the thought or hope of being an exception to the rule is a part of the self-delusion. Projecting strength is such an intricate part of the mob code, they had become experts of strong face. But to me, disparity is an energy, not a look, in my opinion. With all his criminal behavior, murder, extortion, etc., stars to weigh heavily on the main character, who is Tony, who is now confiding in a complete stranger. The nature of his business leaves him paranoid, and rightfully so. There are strained relations with his family, his crew, and rivals he's made throughout his colorful career. The doctor already has a built-in infatuation with his lifestyle and admires from a distance. The notion of take, not ask persona is what she ultimately desires. She is stoic, talented, and by the books in her own right, but has some jaded to the bureaucracy of her profession. Tony has become infatuated with the idea of her versus her in human form. The idea of a woman learning a skill and making her own way has become an obsession in his romantic life. He doesn't see that in his wife or numerous side pieces, but every now and then he'll run across one. However, he has trouble distinguishing between a strong, independent sort and a disturbed, cold individual. He runs across a woman working at a dealership who seems to have her life together, but as time reveals, that is nothing more than a veil covering a suicidal and very dark soul. As her slip starts to show, he is instantly reminded of his own manipulative and sociopathic mother. Names, looks, addresses change, but the spirit is different versions of the same thing. In a sense, his idea of love has become distorted due to a mother who constantly moves the goalpost. It's simple. Some people simply don't have the ability to care, or their hearts have become so hardened due to the conditions of life. Tony is a person used to getting what he wants, but a true friendship constantly eludes him. To draw a comparison, an addict, for instance, battling against their personal issues, is often told to take certain steps in order to recover. You can take away all their resources, but essentially it's the will that can't be broken. Tony faces a similar feat in women. Yes, you can provide and give a person all you want, but winning a heart takes an altogether different approach. It takes patience, understanding, slow to anger, and can't be manipulated. Love must be planted, nourished, and nurtured, but there is no guarantee it will bear fruit. Deep inside, Tony knows these things, but is persistent, cunning, and most of all, stubborn. He, like a lot of us, is a mixed drink. There is a push and pull between good and bad in all of us. His are just more amplified. He lives in a world of instant gratification and is used to handling and handing out orders. His wife is also an entitled and demanding person in her own right, but the good doctor at the very least is trying to reprogram some of his viewpoints. The mob has some contradicting principles, thus making Tony a walking contradiction. However, in order to be an effective leader, you must address your own faults and weaknesses in order to keep some of his sanity. This is frowned upon by his own people and viewed as weak, and ultimately, you're spilling the beans is their main concern. Unfortunately, they are not in charge, and it's Tony's job to keep this thing going. Giving out orders is just a fraction of being a boss, and it's more about vision and the promise of tomorrow. It dives into the psychological aspects, these higher principles that they delude themselves with and hold others accountable.
1999. That's the day The Sopranos pilot first aired on HBO. It's the day